it's pretty powerful seeing folks show up in their apartments to feel us all connected from our quarantines. Okay, so I think in about 2 minutes, what we're gonna do is we're gonna mute everybody.
Yes.
Just because there's a lot of folks and there's sounds of houses and stuff. Like every time, yeah. So we're gonna mute everyone at about 4:05, and then I'm gonna start to do just an introduction. The guided meditation or the meditation silent part is just 45 minutes, but I'll introduce it first. And then so we'll start with the meditation, then we'll get into the drawing, and then after that we can start to folks can ask questions. So everyone's going to be on mute until we get started with the drawing, and then at that point you can unmute yourself to ask a question. And if that starts to feel like it's difficult, then we can also just have people do chat.
Okay.
And I can Amanda, who is the person who started the project, is helping to
Ay, llegó a saber, me ponía lindo, no me atrevo a entrar, pero se siente también como antisocial cuando todo el mundo está tratando de esto y es como que también está cool que...
So Amanda, I see a message on the side that says that we're only allowing 100.
Oh.
Is that? I thought it was 500, so we didn't stop the registration.
Oh boy.
Okay, let's give it a moment. Then I'm gonna.
Swoon, how long do you think we will be able to go on this today? I'm under Richard. I'm Diane.
Hi. Well, I think it's up to us. I will be available for, I would say between an hour and a half and 2 hours, but, you obviously don't have to stay for the whole time. I say we should plan on a solid hour to be here. And then after that, we'll just see how it goes. And, if it goes longer, great. And if not, great.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's such a good cause.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, and I think that we're going to be able to make a good contribution to the mask fund. So I read this story on Elizabeth Gilbert's profile. She's a writer, and she told this story about this guy who lives down in Mexico who rode his bike to this factory that was selling all these masks, but for some reason, some bureaucracy, they weren't able to sell them to get them to New York because of import, export, something. So he talked to the factory owner and he was like, hey, this is what's going on. Would you be willing to do that? And the guy was like, absolutely, I'd be honored to do this. Let's do it. And they came up with this whole system with FedEx and figuring out how to get thousands and thousands of masks. And so that's what this is going to today. So yeah, I think that we're about to mute everyone. So I don't know what's going on with the 100 people or not. I apologize if anyone can't make it, and we'll sort that out afterward. But at the moment, Amanda, are you around?
I'm gonna work on that to see if I can fix that problem right now.
Okay. Can you mute everyone and we'll start?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is pretty incredible. I've never done something like this, and the folks that I can see, just seeing us all here in our individual spaces is it just feels kind of special. So just kind of having a moment to be like, wow, okay, we're doing this, we're together. And so what I wanted to start us off with is a meditation, and it's a meditation that I do when I'm not doing okay. And I'll just give you a little background about how I started it. So, I come from a background that had a lot of instability. There was a ton of addiction and real deep instability in my family, a lot of chaos. And, you know, I got into my life and I was a pretty chilled out person and a pretty successful person in a lot of areas of my life. But when it came to love and romantic relationships, I came entirely unhinged. And I learned that that has to do with your love relationships being formed in chaos. But the question for me was, well, what do I do about that? Because what I found is that I was being, you know, an emotionally abusive person. And if you can imagine, you know, I would say none of us sitting here today, do you want to say that about yourself? Do you want to say, oh, I'm an emotionally abusive person? Fuck no, that is not how we want to think of ourselves. And so I was like, what do I do? Like, what do I do about this? I cannot live with myself. I can't be this way. And I went to therapy and that was awesome. And I'm still in therapy and it helps so much. But you know, it's all a puzzle and there are all these pieces. And I was like, no, there's something else, like something's missing, like I'm still losing it. And so I was reading this book by a Buddhist nun whose name is Pema Chodron. And she's an American woman who ended up studying Tibetan Buddhism. So what that has meant to me is that she really speaks a language that I understand because she grew up in the same place that I grew up. And so she would talk about, you know, how do we process these feelings? How do we get through this stuff? And it was in a language that really spoke to me. And one of the styles of meditation that she talked about was called Tonglen meditation. And how Tonglen started is, oh, I just see an announcement that it should be open to everyone now. So hopefully folks are able to get through. Okay, so how Tonglen started, as far as I understand it, is that it was really a meditation that was about facing death and suffering and the impermanence of life. And sometimes monks would go so far as to meditate in the charnel grounds. So if you can imagine, in Tibet, you can't bury the bodies. And so they're often, you know, they're out, like, because the ground is so frozen. So often you'll see there'll be piles of bodies kind of waiting for various processes. And so sometimes the monks would go and meditate amongst this carnage. And, you know, it seems strange. Why would you do that to yourself? But what they were doing is they were exposing themselves to the truth of suffering and to the truth of impermanence. And so, you know, that's obviously not what we're going to be doing today at all. But the fact is, we're in the middle of a global crisis and we're all dealing with it in different ways. You know, there are some of us who have lost friends or family members. There are some of us who are dealing with instability about our jobs. There are all kinds of reasons that people can be feeling really freaked out. You know, even, you know, you might be completely fortunate, but maybe you're cooped up with a family member and maybe you guys have a long history and it's tough to get along. I mean, there's any number of reasons that you can be struggling with difficult emotions in this moment. And one thing that I always think about is how important it is to say, hey, there's no hierarchy to suffering. So, you know, for example, I was actually doing this meditation this morning, just kind of getting ready for this class. And one thing that's been driving me crazy is that I have a leaky faucet. And I don't know how to fix it. And I can't call a plumber because we're on quarantine, you know? And I was like, oh, that is the smallest, stupidest thing to worry about. Like, this is life or death. Like, people are, and I'm worried about my leaky faucet. But you know what? My human experience, my human animal is like, God damn that fucking leaky faucet, you know? And so I think that as we're doing this, we should keep in mind that we want to be able to think about going to the depths of the difficult things that we're feeling, but we also want to remember that it's okay to want to give ourselves compassion for super ordinary things and super ordinary problems, because those problems are really connecting us as well. And so I want to read a quote to that Pema Chodron, who's this teacher, and she says this thing. Oh, you know what? I accidentally deleted the quote on my phone, so I'm going to read it off my computer. Okay, so Pema Chodron says, In particular, to care about other people who are fearful, angry, jealous, overpowered by addictions of all kinds, arrogant, proud, miserly, selfish, mean, you name it. To have compassion and to care for these people means not to run from the pain of finding these things in ourselves. In fact, one's whole attitude towards pain can change. Instead of fending it off and hiding from it, one can open one's heart and allow oneself to feel that pain. Feel it as something that will soften and purify us and make us far more loving and kind. And so, with that in mind, I'll just describe what the meditation is. And so what it is it's called sending and receiving, and it's kind of a mind training meditation. And how it works is that on the in-breath, we call to mind something that's really bothering us. Oh, sorry, I just want to back up and say that the sort of advanced technique of this is about thinking about others and sort of sending and receiving for society as a whole. But I want us to start with ourselves, because I think that when we clean up our side of the street, we're a lot more able to be compassionate and to help out others. So we're gonna, for our purposes today, we're gonna practice on ourselves. And so what you do is, on the in-breath, you imagine something that's bothering you. You imagine that fight you just got into and how it made you feel. Did your chest tighten? Did your head hurt? Are your palms feeling sweaty? Are you nervous? Are your thoughts going in circles? Just focus on that quality. What are the thoughts? Is it like a bicycle wheel? They're going around in circles. You can't let them go. On the in-breath, you just focus on like the lived quality of that experience, the hotness in your stomach, the heaviness in your feet. And then on the out-breath, you send out something that you love. And it can be anything. Do you love hot baths? Send out a hot bath. Do you love spending time with your dog? Imagine your dog. Maybe you have an image of universal kindness, this sort of beam of celestial light. You can go big, or you can go like nice cup of coffee. Like, it really doesn't matter. Just on the out breath, you send out something soothing. And then you just keep going like that. In breath, tightness, static, pain. Out breath, soothing, cool, freedom, space. And just keep repeating that. In breath, and we're not getting into the story. We're not like, oh my God, I can't believe she said that to me. We're like, try to, as much as you can, just stay with the felt sense of the feelings, with what's it doing in there. And then on the out breath, the felt sense of something, cooling and wonderful and soothing and whatever it is that you really feel like you need. And what this does for me, why I really clung on to it and kept going with it, is that what it did for me is that it was like minute by minute, it's been me teaching my nervous system that I can sit when difficult emotions come, rather than being like, yeah, I'm going to call this person and yell at them, or like, I'm going to do this really dumb thing that I shouldn't do. It's like trained yourself to be like, oh, I sat through it for one breath. Oh, I sat through it for 2 breaths. And you're teaching this to yourself at the body level. This is not an intellectual exercise. We're going, oh, wow, 3 breaths and I didn't freak out. 4 breaths and I'm still here. And 1 breath at a time, we stay. And so I'm just going to read one more quote from Pema Chodron. And she says, rather than beating yourself up, use your own stuckness as a stepping stone to understanding what people are up against all over the world. Breathe in for all of us and breathe out for all of us. Use what seems like poison as medicine. Use your personal suffering as the path to compassion for all beings. So with that in mind, I want to get us started. So we're going to do 5 minutes and I'm going to time it. So I'm just going to set my clock right now. And so we're just going to sit, and on the in-breath, you're going to take in whatever thing that's a little tough right now. And on the out-breath, you're going to soothe that. And we're just going to do that over and over again for 5 minutes. And you're going to get distracted and you're going to run off on the storyline and just keep coming back. As many times as you get distracted, come back. And 5 minutes is going to feel like a long time, but it'll be over. Just stick with it. It's just a process of staying. So I'm just going to set the alarm right now. And then I'm just going to close my eyes and meditate, and we'll do this together. So the alarm's going to go off in 5 minutes. So everyone just settle in, start on your breathing, and just keep the thoughts linked to the breath. Come back to it when you lose it, and we're all doing it together. That's the bell. Okay, thanks everyone for being willing to have that moment together. It's tough. I'm not used to this format. I would love to ask everyone how they're feeling, but I'll trust that that we're doing good. And yeah, just say that I think that what I'm hoping for this class is sort of about generating compassion for ourselves, and also about doing something that's really relaxing, where we're just kind of zoning in. And so I've done a few different styles of paper cutting over the years, and sometimes I can get really ambitious and I want to be drawing, scenes and this and that, and you're kind of figuring it all out, the complexity of it. But I was thinking today that it might be nice to just draw something decorative, because of how relaxing it can be to not have to think too much about what we're doing. And so I also didn't prepare. I figured, why not just do it all while we're together, keep it simple. So I'm gonna face my my computer down a little bit, and hopefully that will be enough to kind of see what's happening. But so what I decided to do today is to just go really like how we did in school when we made paper snowflakes, because I find that there's something really satisfying to the symmetry. And so I just folded my paper in 4. And I'm kind of just thinking about this as like being quite similar to, when we were kids and we would kind of make a gift for mom, except for this time, you can kind of bring it up to speed with where you're at. But just for the purposes of doing something really easy and simple, what I did was, this is how I normally, I don't know if you can quite see that, but how I normally do it is I'll just draw like a really sort of sketchy design on paper. And then this is just how my brain works, but maybe I'll draw these pencil lines a little more so you can see them. But how my brain works is, first I'll draw the pencil lines, but then when I go to mark out what I'm going to paper cut out, I actually draw kind of around the pencil line, and I sort of put like a little moat around it. So it's almost like I'm kind of redrawing my original image, but sort of fattening it up. And I like that, because there's something about it that kind of just like lets you like take a second look at what you drew and sort of feel like, okay, do I like that line? And so there I've got a couple lines, and then I'm gonna color in my big spaces. And the reason that I color in my big spaces is because if my paper cutout is going to be white, when I color in my big spaces, it allows me to see what I'm going to be drawing. And so there's like the pencil line in the middle, and then I kind of drew around it, and now I'm starting to color in my spaces. And so I would recommend that you guys do something similar. Just pick like the most low pressure, just what does your hand love to do? Like what forms do you just naturally like to draw? And just kind of let that happen. Because our goal today is low pressure on ourselves. Just do something fun, something easy. Okay. So now while we're working on our drawings, I think that would be a good time to, if anyone has any questions, you can unmute yourself before we, and then you can ask any questions about your drawing before we start cutting. Hello.
Oh. Hello.
Hi. Oh, were you just joining the call?
No, I have a question. I just didn't know if you could hear me.
Yeah.
Hi. I am curious. With the snowflake cutouts, there needed to be like a connection part in the middle. Like, you never want to like cut that one part. Are we doing that?
Yes. So let me just like do a little tiny bit more on this design, and I will show you that, because yes, you bring up a really good point, which is that in your design, you want to make sure that you keep a full contiguous piece of paper, and that you don't cut through what you're working on. And that is, I actually think that might be a little easier since we're working with knives rather than scissors. Sometimes I feel like you can just kind of blast through your design with scissors, and I did the folded style, but you should feel welcome to just do a single sheet of paper and not do the folded style, because the folded style also means that you have more layers of paper to cut through, which is a little more challenging. And since we're all about being super unchallenging today, you might just draw a design on the paper. So so what I've drawn here so far, so the black represents areas that are going to be gone, and the white represents areas that are going to remain. And the important thing is that all areas, it's almost like if the white were a basin of water, that if you dump some water right here, it would have to reach all areas of the design. That you want to make sure that nothing blocks the water from flowing through the whole design. And if any line does block the water, accident. Does that make sense?
Hey, can I ask you to show it to us one more time? Just pick it up one more time.
Yeah, hold on one second. I'm just coloring in one more little spot.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to color it in a little further so that it makes a little more sense. That's the one problem with not preparing. That's why they do it on the cooking shows, right? You have it to show.
Real time is good.
Really, yeah. Okay. Okay, and I'm gonna erase my pencil line just so that it's a little easier to see what's going on. So here's the drawing, and so the white is what's going to remain, and the black is what gets cut out. So if you can imagine that I dumped a cup of water right here, whoosh, you can see that it goes through all the channels. Even if it's indirect, it swoops around this way, that way. So everything is connected to everything else. And that's how you make sure that you have one contiguous piece. So just while we're drawing and thinking about meditation and the meditative, so one thing I love to do is when I cut, I can just kind of zone in. I don't have to think too much once the drawing is done, once you're sort of sure about it. And I like to listen to audiobooks. And how I got into that style of meditation is a friend of mine used to just like as a gift to his friends, he would just drop things onto your computer while you weren't noticing. And so one time I opened up I was like, what is this Pema Chodron? What is that? And so I put it on, and she had this teaching, I think it was called Shenpa. And, I always grew up, you'd hear about Buddhism and they'd say, oh, non-attachment, non-attachment. And I was like, okay, what are we talking about here? Is it like I shouldn't want a Lamborghini, or like what is this what's it about? And it always felt a little abstract to me what non-attachment actually meant. And then I was just going through my computer, and I put this woman on, and she talked about this thing called Shenpa, and she called it's like a fish hook, and it's like the fish hook just gets you, and it like hooks your guts from the inside. And she said it's like anything. It's like if your coworker says something snotty to you and you're hooked, the hook has gotten you. Or you see an attractive person on the street, the hook has gotten you. And it's not that it's bad to have feelings. It was more that she talked about when those things become involuntary, when we're not at choice over what we do, that at that point we're hooked, we have Shenpa. And that in a lot of ways, that's like what that's one of the forms of attachment that Buddhism is talking about. And what surprised me so much, and when she started talking about addiction, and addiction is a serious Shenpa, you really have, you're in a place where the need to soothe your nervous system is so great that you give over your power in 1,000 ways. And it was just the first time it was like this fresh voice, and I was like, wait, what? This makes sense to me. Like I never really could kind of hear those teachings until I found this audiobook. And so if folks who want to get into doing some paper cutting and listening to books, I would highly recommend almost anything by Pema Chodron. She's got dozens of lectures and books. Okay, so here's what my finished drawing looks like for anyone who's interested. And one thing to notice is that there's white on the edges right here and right here. And that is also important for if you're doing the folded style and you want your piece to be contiguous, you want to make sure that you have a spine where the paper is folded. So anywhere where the paper is folded, you need to have at least some white right there. And so this is how I'll do my design, and I'll do it this way because this gives me a pretty good indication of what my cutout's going to look like. I do the black around, and that gives me a pretty good sense. And I do this when I'm doing portraits or more complicated pieces as well, because it's so hard to tell what you're going to get once you get into something really complicated. So where are people at with your drawings? Are you still working? You want to start cutting soon? Yeah, okay. So first I'm just going to talk about knives a little bit. So different people have different preferences. My knife of choice is this guy, but the X-Acto is better for small, really tiny circular motions, but for some reason I just like this guy. It's the Olfa, and it has these black blades that are interchangeable. The black blades are a little sharper than the regular blades. They also break more easily, but they're sharper. And I snap them. So if you have one of these styles of knives, I'll just put my computer down so you can see the way that I snap the blade. I do this by hand. And I actually think that with knives, it's one of those things where if you keep everything really controlled and close, it's not actually very dangerous. And so there's a striation right there along the blade of the knife. So you want to make sure that your striation is at the same direction as the metal part of the knife. And going that direction, I just hold it down so it doesn't snap up and get in your eye, and then put your blade somewhere safe. And then, my dad taught me very young, I'm just going to be my dad for a second. It is not a matter of when you slip. Oh, sorry, if you slip. I'm not very good at being my dad. It's when you slip. So keep in mind that you're going to slip. This knife is going to slip. And when it does, your whole body has to be positioned so that it goes away from yourself. So never, ever, ever, ever do this, ever. Only ever, you can hold your paper, but at all points, you want to be kind of keeping the awareness, like right now I'm holding it, it slips this way. That's fine. So right now I'm holding it, it's my arm is there. It slips, but if it slips, my hand is still out of the way. So it's all about slowness and control, and making sure that your hand is never in the path, or your leg or any other part of your body is never in the path of the blade. The other thing is, I've actually never cut myself while I was working. When I cut myself is when I'm holding a knife while I'm doing something else. Like, let me just keep holding this knife while I'm trying to open this package. Do not do that. Always be conscious of what's going on with your knife, because for me, the best way to cut myself is to be holding it while I'm doing something else. So just be really conscious of your knife, move really slowly. And, I really think of this as like, because you have to move so slowly, it's like, that's when we get into this meditative thing that like, there's no quick path through it. People would often ask me like, what's your trick? And this was like before lasers were a thing. And I was like, there's no trick. The trick is that you slow down and do it. And it's inch by inch, hour by hour, and that's it. And so, and actually, to return to Pema Chodron, she has this teaching called the wisdom of no escape, which is that like, once we give up the idea that like something's going to be quick or there's going to be some instantaneous feedback, then we can just like, or the idea that, we can escape from our circumstances that are difficult, that maybe are insoluble, that once we accept that, then we can kind of like slow down and just get into, taking it piece by piece. And I think paper cutting sort of has that quality, because you just got to chill out and melt down into it. You might want to tape your paper down. You might want to staple it if things start slipping. But otherwise, I would say, just start cutting. And I'm gonna face it toward me, but if you guys have questions, just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask.
Want light?
Yeah.
Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Want light?
Yes, please.
Yep. She gets stop at 5?
No. 6.
6?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get charged.
And you want to cut with a nice, if you're doing the folded style, you want to give a decent amount of pressure and just move real slow so that you can cut all the way through. And I like to change my blade quite a lot. to just keep things easy. I'll snap my blade pretty often.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you use the same technique when you are trying to figure out more complex designs like portraits or landscapes where you fatten the line?
Yeah, absolutely. Although, you know, when I do a portrait, I will tend to work, the difference is that I'll tend to darken in my shadows rather than darken the like in this case my drawn line became the white line, but when I'm doing a portrait on white paper, my my drawn lines, you know, when you're drawing a face, you tend to draw the shadows. So the drawn lines will tend to become the shadows, and those will tend to become black, and I'll cut those out. I'm gonna just pop out for 1 second and see if I can find photographs of that process to show.
Cool.
Okay, I can't find it, but I'll just do a little quick demo.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Could you point your camera down?
Like, let me get ready. Okay, so here's so I'm drawing. So when I start with a portrait, I'll tend to just start with really loose lines. So that's just like, you know, basic scribble of a face. You can see that there's a face there. And then the next thing that I'll do is be like, okay, so I'm going to decide that the meat of this portrait is going to be the paper, which means that I want to say some of these lines are going to be cut out, and those cut out lines are going to be like what shows through the paper. That's going to define the image. But if I cut out too much, the whole paper is going to fall apart, and that's where it gets really challenging. You know, the ornamental stuff is much easier. But so what I've done here is I've decided on a few lines. So there's like a top lip and the bottom lip, and see how there's like some scribbly lines. Those are going to be like, let's say, an eyelid and an eyebrow. But see how, for example, I'm just going to erase that to make it more clear. You know, when I draw in real life, I will want to connect the eyelid to the eyebrow a lot of times, because you'll see, you know, that shadow will carry through. But in a paper cut, you can't do that, because otherwise your whole thing's gonna fall out. So I like to just see where the natural breaks are. You know, I don't want it to be like a stencil where it's done mechanically, where you insert a bunch of breaks. I like to just draw like more of an organic line, and then just be like, let's see where I can get away with leaving some paper in. Then once I've got that, what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll just very meticulously only cut out those exact lines that I drew, and I'll just kind of follow my drawing, you know, really, really taking it quite literally. And that's also a process I find super relaxing, because, you know, you did your fast drawing, you made all these kind of, yeah, look, I just did gesturing with my knife in my hand. Bad Callie. So you stab yourself in the face. But you know, you made your drawing, you did all this thinking, and then now it's time to just like zone in and like relax into the carving. And it's the same is true for me with linoleum, that you know, you've made all these decisions in advance, and then now you've just got like a couple 100 hours of doing, and that doing can be really meditative, and it can be a form of freedom, because your mind is free, but your hands are working, and you know, your mind is still there processing, but there's something about it that's just very, I don't know, I'm sure we've all experienced it. I don't quite know how to describe it. It just kind of engages enough of yourself that it allows you to relax and to think.
Flow.
Flow, there you go. Yeah, it gets you into flow. Okay, so I'm just gonna put this blue here to give a sense of color. But can you see how one eye is cut out and one eye is not? So this one is the cut out one. And so it's like I drew the lines, I drew the little lines, and then on the one side I cut out those little lines, and you see they're kind of bigger. So it'll tend to, you know, it's like it'll tend to sort of emphasize and simplify your drawing. And I always like that too, because it's like it forces a style onto your line. And that can be nice. You know, it can be nice to give your lines a second go, and to have them kind of need to fill a certain form. It gives them a certain character.
I'm so afraid to talk to anyone.
I have a quick question. How long have you been cutting?
In my life?
Yes, because it's hard, and we were just talking about how hard it is and how easy you make it look.
A very long time.
How long?
I don't even really cut that much anymore, because I you know, I'm just doing other things. But I started this technique when I was, you know, I mean, 20 years ago. I would say, like, at least, yeah, so maybe cutting for 20 years. And that's why, yeah, I'm just kind of, you know, doing it, and it looks casual. I just want to show another example. So I cut out the eyebrow, and another thing, sorry, one sec. You know, another thing that you can do is you can kind of ask the paper to make these kind of squiggly journeys. So if you'll see this eyebrow, there's like a light patch within the eyebrow, you know, because sometimes you'll want a shadow, but you'll also want a highlight. And so you can find a way to make these kind of squiggly meandering lines, like it goes this way, then it goes back this way, and it goes back that way. And I'm getting away with that because I'm leaving enough of this of this white paper, you know, and it's contiguous with everything else. And so when I draw the faces, I just try to get away with as much as I can. You know, I'm constantly in this kind of negotiation about how do I make it represent, you know, shadow? How do I make it represent hair? How do I make it represent folded skin? And then how do I do all that without it falling apart?
Oh my God.
Yes.
This is amazing. This is so much fun.
That's awesome.
Hell yeah. I'm so glad that was a good, oh my God. That's great. That thing is so cool. Isn't this fun?
This is amazing.
Yay. I'm really happy that you're enjoying it.
I'm very slow.
Yeah. Some of us are slow. I mean, honestly.
I'm super impatient. So impatient. I need to get it done.
When I was a kid in school, I remember this time I got a D in my art class, and my mom was furious. She was like, you know, because I was like a freaking oil painter by this point. She's like, what are you, this kid is getting a D in art class? And it was because I could never finish anything because I was too slow.
I work on like 5 or 6 paintings at a time. I'm working over here, and then I'm on, and I can't work any other way because I'm like, there's too many things to come out, and I don't have enough time. So here we go.
Well, in the brain, I mean, don't you find that you think about things, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, your brain, you've got a lot in the subconscious. You got enough channels.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
To be processing those things simultaneously.
Plenty of bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
I've always found that cutting paper was the only thing that I could actually finish. It forces me to like sit with it, because otherwise I'm doing 72 different things in the studio.
Right. So I find also I'm reaching the outer perimeter of my drawing, and I'm finding that that is the toughest part. So, you know, if you need to use masking tape to hold down the sort of tendrils, feel free to do that. You know, just peel it on and off carefully. Otherwise, just hold, you know, hold down the tendrils as well as you can. I've always really identified with that phrase with my knife. I've always really identified with that phrase, keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer. Because I think you can do a lot with your knife very close to you if you just move really slow and just know where it's at.
Do you think that you could paste your wheat paste recipe somewhere in this class?
Yeah, well, how about I'll just tell it. So for folks that are interested in wheat pasting, I am pretty into making that recipe easy for myself. You know, I've tried the complicated stuff over the years where you're cooking it and you're adding salt or adding sugar, you're adding, you know, wheatgrass or whatever's going on there.
Organic.
But and you can do that. But what I personally do, because I just found that I just want to get it done, is that I order either Golden Harvest or Zinsser pre-mixed wallpaper paste. It has to be dry. The wet stuff will not always dry clear. So it has to be the dry powdered wallpaper paste. And then I also like to add either an acrylic gel medium or glue. Like wood glue or something, and you want to add that after the dry paste is mixed. So you start with your dry paste, and I like to mix it in a little bit of warm water. It's a little bit just like making a cake batter. You kind of just shake in a little, mix it, shake in a little, mix it.
Interesting.
If you're getting ambitious, you put a cake mixer on the end of a drill and just, you know, that's what we do when we're doing a huge mural. But otherwise, you know, you can mix it in a cup. Just a little bit of wheat paste. And then the glue or the gel medium makes it more waterproof. So the reason to add, particularly the gel medium after, is because the waterproofness will sometimes encapsulate the wheat paste, and it will cause it to not want to mix with the water as well. So first you mix the dry, then you add in the gel medium, put a ton of that in, however much you want. And then how you do your pasting is you paste down the surface of, you know, whatever you're pasting to first. Then you lay your paper down and lay a nice coat of paste on top of that, and then try to kind of smash it into the surface and just, you know, really get it in there. And you know, then you get something where your top is sealed and it's really pressed into the surface. And you know, if you're pasting outdoors with that recipe, I've had that last for years. And it just depends on the texture of the wall and the, you know, how much rain and sun it's getting. But particularly if it's in a protected place, or if you're doing it for your own artwork, that can be a totally archival process.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me know any other questions you guys have.
Do you put acrylic medium over it then?
Well, the acrylic medium's in the paste, so yeah.
But do you need to put anything on top of it once it's
well, you're putting, so you put down the paste like onto the wall, you know, you lay down your paste, and then you put your artwork over that, and then you put another layer of paste on top of that, and then you smush it all in, so it's already sealed at that point.
Great, thank you.
I hate to keep talking, but we're gonna need some ratios there.
No ratios. I'm not
Just
that
like
kind of person.
by feel, right? Okay, I got it.
I'm like, but okay, so just to give you I like to do thicker than house paint, but thinner than grits. And I like for my paste to look white with gel medium, so I like to put I basically put in as much gel medium as I can afford, because that shit is expensive.
I was gonna say that's a.
So if you got, you know, if you have the budget and you can afford a lot, then put it in, and if not, put in a little, or put in wood glue, or.
Oh yeah,
that works better than others.
Say what?
Is there a certain gel medium that works better than others? Because like I've tried, obviously like golden works great, but then like I've tried just the basic, like let's say the Blick brand, and it doesn't hold up as good. Do you care, or you just kind of use one and they all work the same?
Gosh, I've never even noticed.
Okay, cool. That's
but
good.
I think it's because have a fairly unscientific mind, so I probably just failed to notice. I probably just was like, that one didn't work, and I never figured out why.
Right, I got you. Okay.
The phrase thicker than, what did you say? Thicker than house paint? Thinner than grits.
Yeah.
That's how I know you're from Florida.
My stepdad was a house painter, so I'm like, go out in that shed, get it thicker than a house paint, but thinner than them grits. Hi, Tina.
Hi. How much you get in between your fingers, right? That's the.
Oh, is that another test?
Well, you gotta, you know, when we get our fingers in there, right?
Yeah, we probably shouldn't.
Does wood glue change the tone of whatever your wheat paste?
But it tends to dry clear. But if you put in too much, you can, yeah.
What would you tell the 18-year-old that couldn't finish her work, with younger you? What would you tell her now?
That she couldn't finish her work this afternoon?
No. When you said that you couldn't finish any of your projects in high school, what would you tell her now?
Oh, I was even littler then. I was probably like 10 or 12. Okay. What would I tell her now? You know, I think she was on her path. I would just say, you know what I would tell her is, don't worry about their opinion. You know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I would say, it's okay to just fucking finish something sometimes.
It's okay to fucking fail art and still be an artist.
Yeah, exactly. It's okay to fail art and still be an artist. And also everything doesn't have to be perfect. But, you know, one time I, you know, it's a tough one, this question of perfectionism, right? Because on the one hand, perfectionism is crippling. But on the other hand, you know your standards of excellence, and that's your truth. You know, one time often when I work in museums, I'm working with an installation crew, and they're doing things that I don't know how to do. So I'll have to say, hey, can you hang that thing? Da-da-da. I'm not up there hanging it. You know, they're doing this work. And so I've had various times when people have hung it wrong for some reason. Something happened and they did it wrong. And I've really had to sort of hold ground and say like, hey, I know that you don't want to redo that, but those 10 inches really matter in a real way. And let's take this seriously. You know, and one time in one of those situations, I had this installer later tell me, never let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I was like, like, I was like, no, we're not going for good, we're going for great, and I'm fine with that, you know. And I think that like there are times that we can let our perfectionism stop us, but there are also times when we just have to be like, no, these are my standards. And that slow little girl was finding her standards, and she was finding that sometimes it put her at odds with people, and sometimes it still puts me at odds with people. And sometimes I have to learn to just fucking get it done. And other times I have to learn to say, no, this is what needs to happen.
Yeah.
It's hard to know when. It's hard to know when it's when, you know.
I have always had a problem with that. That's always been my biggest challenge with my creative process. And it wasn't until I talked to my therapist about it, and he gave me a super helpful framework, which he said, you know, you can be critical, but at a point you're not completing your work, or you're not doing what you want to do. So ask yourself, is it true? Could you be doing better, or is this good enough? And even if you can't answer that question, say, is it helpful? Mm. So then if the criticism is not helpful, then it's not true. It's not you. It's not your creative self. Right. And that like really changed my whole perception of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Ellie, I'm curious whether your process whether you're doing anything different in this time of quarantine. It seems like your work totally lends itself to this sort of, you know, isolation, and it seems like you work in isolation a lot, but are you finding yourself doing things differently or thinking about things differently because of this time?
I'm doing things very differently. You know, because a lot of my processes, you know, not to mention, you know, that, for example, we're not going to Haiti this month, and we were going to. So there's my community-based work, but there's also, you know, even in my studio. So I'm a professional artist, which means that I take on big projects that are bigger than I can do alone, which means that I have people who help me. And when we come together in the studio and we work on stuff, and that can't happen right now. And so I needed to change my process. And, you know, as it turned out, I was going to work on a drawing show, and I was going to give myself like a week to do all the drawings for it, because I'm not really good with that sort of time management. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to get this entire show done in a week, which was silly. And now I'm here alone in my studio, my apartment studio. And I'm just like, oh my God, thank you, universe, for this time. Like, thank you. Like, I'm drawing every day, and I'm like, what business did I have not doing this? Like I feel like I'm getting back to crucial, getting back to basics, getting back to like just the original self, you know? I'll show you guys. So here's my drawing wall. Let's take a little tour.
Oh, yes.
So
we gotta look at this.
So here's I can't even see what I'm showing you, so hopefully I'm showing you something.
It's all amazing. Just keep doing it.
So just, you know, basically doing tons of drawings and just spending time, you know, the question we were asking about perfectionism, I'm moving really fast on purpose, because I have this feeling where I'm like, no, don't sink into something. You know, this is one of the more detailed ones I did right at the beginning. And then I was like, no, move faster than that. Be sloppier than that. Because I have this feeling that there's something that I'm trying to learn that I can only learn by making myself do a lot of iterations and just calling things done. Just being like, stop now, stop now. So there's like a big part of my brain that keeps going, quit now, just quit now. And it's really like a discipline to say like, this thing isn't perfect. And it's not supposed to be. You're just like, you're figuring out your own language of drawing again.
Do you find that your work is different during this time? Like my women that I usually paint just strong, inspirational, like badass women. But now my anxiety has become so overwhelming during this that my women are more vulnerable, I guess, and my images are more about like overcoming anxiety and mental illness and things like that, which I've never let myself be open to kind of touching upon yet. So I find this whole other like theme of my artwork opening up during this time, which is good because I feel like women don't always have to be strong. We have to see that it's okay to be vulnerable and to get through things. And that in itself is like the strength in it. You know what I mean? So my work has just completely changed during this, like my theme. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I am looking back through my life. So because I love to draw from photographs, I love, looking at documentation. But I'm holed up in New York City. But what I realized is I was like, oh my God, I've had a really intense life for the last 20 years. I've seen the world. I've met thousands of people. I've taken tens of thousands of photographs. Why don't I just look at that again? And what I found is that every time I would make one block print, because a block print takes like a month. So it's a huge investment, which means that you only choose very certain subjects. And so I found that there were like hundreds of subjects, from 5, 10, 15 years ago that I had been like, oh, I really want to draw this person, but I just didn't have time. I didn't get around to it. And now I'm like, oh my God, I'm like a kid in a candy shop of my own life, just kind of going back through it.
That's great.
You answered my question. I wondered if you worked from memory, photographs.
Yeah, I like to work from photographs because it sort of keeps me within a kind of a specificity. It helps me to, if I just draw from memory, I'll tend to repeat myself. There tends to have a sameness kind of creeps into things. And so for me, drawing from life or a photograph kind of pushes me to adopt the specificity of the world in a way that for my process is I find beneficial.
I have a question. When you get roadblocks, what are some tips that you use to work through artist blocks?
Please tell.
Wait.
Artist blocks. So I would actually, can I hear from like maybe 1 to 3 people about like what kinds of artist blocks? Like what is an example, like what does an artist block feel like for you, or how does it show up in your life?
Since I asked the question, I guess I should answer. For me, sometimes it feels like everything I do, I hate. And I'm like, that sucks. And everyone, no matter which step I take, feels not like the right step.
Wow. That's, yeah. Okay, so I'll just answer to that. So I'm not sure if, what happens for me that I can relate to that is that whatever I'm making, there's kind of like an insult machine in my head. There's like this voice that's like, oh, nice Disney princess you're drawing there, sweetheart. Like, it's just like anything that it could look like. It'd be like, oh, what are you illustrating for video games now? Oh, like, what the hell is that? Like, it just on and on and on. What is this, like a brochure for an insurance company? Like anything that it could look like that maybe wasn't my goal, there's just this voice in my head that's just badgering me, just being like, your thing is shit and you're shit. And yeah. And
self-critical voice.
Yeah. It's so nasty. It's quite abusive. And I always thought that was just, but I'm like struggling to remember now something where somebody was like, oh yeah, that voice doesn't have to stay. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, that's part of my personality. But apparently, rumor has it that we can get that voice to grow smaller. And I don't know how, but I've heard rumor.
Yeah, they keep telling me that.
Observe your own thoughts as if you're like not the person saying them, like you're just an observer of a conversation. And that's to help me sometimes when I'm starting to like spin out. I just stop and I listen. And then once I realize I'm the listener and not the one having the thoughts, those are just the dialogue in my head, then you kind of gain control. Like, how could I be listening to this if this was really me saying it? I'm the listener. Right. So that kind of helps a little. I know that sounds crazy, but
no, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, because it's so much about getting the, meditation as well is about getting the observer, bringing the observer online.
That's good.
And curiosity, right? Be curious about why, like where these thoughts are actually coming from, or why do you feel the need to beat yourself that?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, just like, who are you, voice? What are you trying to?
You're an asshole. Get out of here.
Yeah. Or like, what's going on? Like, maybe you're afraid, or maybe you have a standard of excellence that you're trying to uphold, but maybe you don't have to do it by insulting me.
Yeah.
Maybe you can say, I'm afraid, or I'm not sure I like this. Maybe there's like a gentler way that we can learn to speak to ourselves.
I have a tool that I use that my therapist taught me, and it's real simple because I have a tendency towards obsessive thinking, and it's bless and release. Just bless and release, bless and release when it starts happening.
So like, thank you for what you're trying to express.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's very helpful.
I have a tool. So I've named mine Howard. Because
Howard,
like one of those awful art instructors that I had with like the corduroy and the patches that was like always stunk like cigars and was really critical, and nothing that I did was right, and I was always like ashamed and embarrassed, and that's that feeling place. So I just tell Howard to fuck off.
Yeah.
And then my therapist told me that I should be speaking to myself as kindly as I try to speak to my daughter.
Yes, I was going to say that same
Something
I get the same, yes.
Yep.
Or I try to treat myself like a tree, because I've never found a tree that I don't think is gorgeous and beautiful, and they're all like gnarled and ugly. And if I just like picture myself as a tree in all of my ugliness, I would still be nice to myself. And like, I try to do that.
That's awesome.
I think I did mine backwards and I cut out the wrong parts of it, but I love it. I do everything backwards, so I'm just accepting it.
Just accept it. It's gorgeous. Ooh. Wait, you need to say this. There's somebody holding something up. Say a word so it'll show up bigger.
Oh, this was mine. I did it on Thomas Guides. But then my Sharpie's kind of showing through.
Yeah, that'll happen.
I like the Sharpie showing through. It gives it an abstract feel.
Yeah. And the other thing I used to do when I was first starting these is, so then I'd have this object, and then I would actually trace that object. So this is because I wanted to go paste it on the street. So I would set this object down and I would trace the whole thing, and then I would stack up like 5 sheets of paper and staple it, and then I would recut them. Or when I did it the first time, I would already have the 5 sheets of paper.
Right.
That way you just peel off your Sharpie layer if you're not into that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my recommendation for or don't use Sharpie. But even still, whatever you use is going to show up. So sometimes it's good to have a clean layer.
So what kind of paper do you use when you go and you do the wheat paste and you do like the quick, like when you're not really doing it like as a commission, you're just kind of doing it? What paper is that you kind of roll up and keep in your backpack? Like,
yeah, you can use any roll thin paper. So I like to use packing papers.
Okay.
Newsprint, craft paper, or there's a paper called Sign Writer's Bond, and it's all about being thin. It shouldn't be thicker than typing paper, which is why typing paper is great. So anything, like don't get nice drawing papers.
Yeah.
Because the thinner it is, the more it soaks the fibers and you squish it into the wall. Otherwise it resists and it wants to come off the wall.
Right.
But if it's nice and thin and then you just smush it into the wall,
I remember these huge pieces you used to make.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember helping you wheat paste one once, and I was so sad about it.
Why?
I wanted it. Because I wanted it for me.
Oh, you wanted it.
Did you ever regret putting anything up? I know for me, you were always identified as this person that like gave these incredible things. And so I wonder if you ever just wanted to keep it, if you ever regretted like a piece that you put up on the street.
Well, I was never that pure, and I always kept a copy. I think if I hadn't kept a copy, I would have regretted it.
Is the paper that you use for the outside what you described too? That same bit paper for outdoor murals?
Yeah, the Sign Writer's Bond, craft paper.
Yeah. Okay.
newsprint. You know, if you want to do like the newsprint and the craft paper are not archival as much long term, but they still, you know, I seal them. When I do it for Inside Works, I'll just put a shit ton of gel medium on them to make them last, so that it's not, you know, the same processes aren't going to happen as outside. So yeah, it's, you know, I think it's kind of up to you. Can I see what you made? Yeah. Cool. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, and so relaxing these look.
I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for being a part of this.
Thank you so much.
Can we do this every Sunday?
Well, Sunday's my writing day, so I don't know. Maybe not next Sunday, but we'll keep you posted. Ooh, whoever's holding one up, say something so it can pop up big.
Me. It says Richard, but I'm Diane.
Nice. That says Richard. Oh, you're okay. I thought I was like,
I'm on his.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
people are cooking.
Here's mine.
These are awesome.
These are so much fun. Thank you.
Started doing it on
fun.
I first started doing it on a rice paper. That was too thin.
Thin. Rice paper is too thin. And if you
I started one on a rice paper. That was definitely too thin.
Yeah, and sometimes it'll kind of tear because the
It did. I have definitely a torn one.
I used origami paper and it worked really well.
Oh, nice.
Oh, yeah.
Tracing paper.
Cut really easily.
Yeah, so this was
The moment and opening them up and just finding this.
oh, beautiful.
Hey, isn't that fun? The reveal.
So that was
There
that.
we go.
Nice.
So now I really like this, even though I did it backwards. And I'm like, how am I going to do it again? So maybe I could just take a photocopy of it and then just cut out the white, right?
Yeah. Well, hold on. Hold it up again.
No.
So what do you mean you did it backwards?
So I'm like, I kind of like it. It looks like just a
So
fun
the paper is the black, right?
The paper, yeah. See, the paper's the black. And then I just went over everything in Sharpie.
Oh, yes. Yeah, just make a photocopy of that and cut out the white.
White. Okay, cool. Because now I want 100 of them so I can glue them to the walls in my house because I'm losing my mind.
Exactly. Yeah.
I brought too big a Sharpie downstairs, and I don't know where my little one was. It would have been a lot easier with a smaller Sharpie.
Yeah.
Smaller blade.
Yeah.
Because working around in tinies.
Right.
Yeah.
Callie, I'm going to do this with my students this week.
Oh,
I
good.
teach 9th through 12th graders at a private school. I don't know how I'm going to get around the exactos, but I may have to drop them off. I'm not sure. But I first learned about you, I think it was 15 years ago. You had a show in Miami. It was crazy. It was like cardboard cutouts. And you took over this whole gallery and we were able to like crawl through it. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That was amazing.
Thank you. I'm so glad you saw that. Yeah, that was that was right after my first major show with Dykes Projects in New York, and then we brought it to Miami. And Os Jameos were on the other side.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was so fun.
I've also I work with Kimberly Henriksen, and I work up at the Center for Contemporary Printmaking.
Oh,
and
nice.
I know that you've been working with her with the Print Club of New York.
Yeah,
So,
that was awesome.
Yeah, I have that print. I'm really excited.
Oh, you do? Oh, cool. The music box.
I do, yeah. We're gonna see if the Rose Museum would like a copy of it because I got 2 of them. We're gonna hope. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
It's
Nice. Yeah. The print that you have is from a project called the Music Box, which is in New Orleans, and they're actually shut down right now as well. But those 2 just wrote a great article about, just art and community, and yeah, I'm really trying to send them a lot of goodwill in this moment.
Yeah, I've been reading about your project with the Music Box.
I mean, and the project is so much about community that it's hard in this moment. It's not the kind of project that can just go inside.
Kim had told me a lot about it. Yeah, she was really very excited about it.
Yeah.
Will you be doing more workshops like this that we could recommend to people?
I don't have any plans to, but I don't know if there's a way, that you guys could. So if you were here now, is the host, and they're doing these kind of. So that's who you should look at, and then we'll talk about whether or not we do something in the future. And I don't know if you guys want to sign up to their mailing list, or, I'll announce it on Instagram. You can follow their Instagram. But it seems like they have a lot of really great artists doing all different kinds of things. So yeah, I would keep
Right. Yeah.
Do you ever do collage?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I love collage. And collage, it's one of those things where it's nice because you can bring in something like this kind of object, which has these crazy edges, and then you can bring in, squares and different kinds of papers, and you can just kind of mix it up, and find a lot of forgiveness in the messiness of that medium.
Yeah, that's what I primarily do. And doing this, I was like, oh my God, there's so much more now that I can integrate.
Absolutely. It's
that.
great
So it's really cool.
collage because it changes the tempo a little. It kind of brings in the other voice. And then you're like, okay, now I got this voice going and these things happening. And
totally.
What I like also about this is that I've been doing a lot with hole punches in many different shapes of hole punches. So this adds a totally different dimension to add to it.
Right, totally. Yeah, and to the person who said they're going to teach a class, you can do this with scissors. You can do just 3rd grade snowflake style, but just more carefully. And people have scissors at home.
Can I suggest a tool? I have this like safety cutting swivel blade, so it spins and it's really good for kids. And the blade is like a centimeter long.
Where did you get that?
Really hard to like hurt yourself. And it's a good grip on it too. It's really thick.
And you found it went through your paper pretty well?
I used a really thick paper, so no. But
if you used a single sheet.
I have another swivel blade too that's a little sharper.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see that one.
But maybe if it was a single sheet of thinner paper, it would be easier.
But it's a good kid one.
Cool.
I had a question toward so we are working at home with a press that we have. We're trying to finish up advanced printmaking for this semester. And it has been tough trying to deal with oil-based processes because we've been trying to just do intaglios and some stencil prints. But what are some quarantine tips you have for printmakers?
Oh my God. I mean, the first answer is I don't know because I'm not doing printmaking at home. But one thing I will say is that when I do printmaking at home, and I don't know how this will work with intaglio, but I do block printing. And when I do printmaking at home, I don't use any solvents. I just use oil. So like I clean my hands, I clean my block, everything with vegetable oil. And then follow that up with like simple green on your block. And the reason that I do that is it doesn't stink as bad. But that's truly the only tip I have. I apologize. I don't have a better.
It's okay.
I'm just over here with my acrylic paint.
Yeah, we've done, we tried doing a traditional water rubbing on, what was it called? Mokuhanga?
Yeah, Mokuhanga.
Last night, and that worked out a lot better with the cleanup. It's just, I don't know, it's crazy, but.
It is crazy. And printmaking is such an intensive world. I mean, I in a lot of ways, I don't even consider myself a printmaker, even though I do so much printing, because I really just sort of created my own way of doing this one process. And there's all these other incredible processes that I just don't know anything about. My process was just like me in my house. And so my process was a block of linoleum, chop it up, roll out your oil-based ink, lay your paper down, print it by hand, and then clean yourself and your block up with vegetable oil, and then spray that down with simple green. So that's my only recommendation for home-based printmaking.
Thank you so much.
Hey, can I put in a plug? Sligo Press in Cleveland has a green press, and a lot of our area universities are trying to get students through. I'm actually a museum person, and I've been working with area universities to get students shows for this season. So I've been hearing a lot of people trying to get press stuff done, and Zygote Press has been doing inviting people to do a lot of green printing, and they use the directions from
Zia May, which is in Western Massachusetts, has pioneered more sustainable printmaking practices. And also, like you had said, using cleanup, using vegetable oil, and then also just like Dawn dish soap and water to kind of finish off wiping things down. but just ZMA, they do a lot of research, and then they publish their research on their website. And they are the leaders in this field right now.
That's VMA?
ZMA.
Yeah.
ZMAY, I think.
Yes.
The Northeast Ohio has a huge printmaking community. We're trying to get a lot of print students through without anything. We've been inviting people to go to that. Zygote itself is green in Cleveland, but they don't have a lot of stuff on their website because we had to close down. Obviously, because we don't have a cleaning company. It's a cooperative print press. So maybe those will help a little.
Can I ask you a question?
Hi.
So, I've displayed a couple times at some shows, and then last summer I displayed at the Every Woman Biennial in LA. And I find that I'm too shy to stand by my artwork or be over there. And it's almost like every time I display, I kind of run away. So I don't have to see people look at my art, but I want to kind of get over that. Do you have any tips for that?
Oh gosh, I kind of don't, because the reason I was laughing when you said that is one of my very early shows was a group show, and it ended up to be, a popular show, a lot of people, and I just went behind a big tree and stayed there.
Yeah, that's what I did at the Every Women's Biennial. It ended up being a lot more people than I thought there'd be, and so I just found some catty corner and I hid over there. And
I know,
pop out.
it's real, because the reason that we can do the work we can do is because we're extremely comfortable. I am not mad at quarantine. I am not mad at this. We are people who are comfortable with this kind of thing. So many of us, and so when it then comes time to take that temperament and bring it back out into the world, it's hard. And so I'm trying to think. So some of the things that I like to do are become curious about other people, because that's something I know. I'm always curious about other people. So it can be kind of like, they want to talk to me about myself, and I'm going to feel so stupid and shy. So I'll just be like, well, where are you from? How are you doing? And if you ask people about themselves, they'll talk to you about themselves. And that was a real way that I could take pressure off of do you like my art? Or, either the difficulty of accepting a compliment, which is very hard, it's sad to say, or the difficulty of feeling insecure. Maybe they don't like it. And so just finding as much as I can turn that experience outward facing, I myself become a lot more comfortable to remain within it.
Yeah, that definitely helps. It's so weird hearing people talk about something I've made in form of expression, because it's not just compositionally in colors, this is fun to look at. It's this is an outward direction of something inward. So it's ugh.
Yeah. And also remembering that people are having such a different experience of it than you did. It can feel really vulnerable at first to put out something, to be like, oh my God, they're all gonna see me, but they don't really.
Yeah.
They see themselves, and that's great. That's great. It doesn't. That's what's wonderful about it, is that they see themselves in it, and that kind of takes some of the pressure off this, oh my God, they're gonna see me feeling, because what they're connecting with is something inside themselves, and that's the sort of the beautiful thing about it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
so much, Callie.
Your retrospective am I even on? Oh, yes, I am. Your retrospective in Cincinnati revealed a lot about you, and that was absolutely beautiful. So thank you for expressing all that within your art through that time. And in fact, that particular showing, some people I just had seen my work before, and because of that show, I was able to get a commission. I'm a paper artist, so I have to thank you personally for that.
Hell yeah. That makes me really happy. And also thank you for saying that about Cincinnati, because as much as I was saying it's fine, when I was making the Medea piece, I was like a deer in headlights for weeks. I was I couldn't, I was just just at functioning. And then I gave a talk at this conference called Horizons, where I talked for 30 minutes just about the Medea piece and about my family history with addiction and so on. And, you know, again, it was like I wanted to pass out. I couldn't stop needing to pee. Like I wanted to throw up. Like all the emotions like leading up to getting on stage were like completely excruciating. But I just heard this kind of truism like yesterday, where it was something about all of the most rewarding things being on the other side of fear. And I was like, that, you know, is sometimes true. And our fears are different for all of us. And, you know, one thing is, like, I was thinking about, I used to live on a bunch of rafts with a bunch of my friends, and we would break down in front of like an oncoming barge. So your like life is basically in danger at this point. So there'd be like a certain amount of fear. We'd all be freaking out and trying to like get the motor started and get us like towed to shore. And it was this like whole thing. And the first time that I ever gave a talk about addiction in my family, I was like, oh, I'm more scared now. And I don't mind public speaking. I don't mind public speaking. I'm like, great, we're all here, let's talk. But this public speaking was like some other thing. And I was like, wow, I'm more afraid to do this than I was breaking down in front of an oncoming barge. And all that to say that our own fears are truly our own, you know, that it's like that hot point of what scares us is so personal. And I think like it's always like in that sweet spot of, you know, we're not trying to brutalize ourselves or traumatize ourselves, but like there is like this real sweet spot for fear, for just being like, I want to throw up and I'm going to get on that stage anyway, knowing that I might throw up, but I'm just going to do it, you know? Yeah, it's like, should you put yourself through that? Me, I would say yes, it was worth it.
Well, I saw those videos and I watched all those on those raft tours, and oh my God, yes, you talk about, nobody would have done that. You're going through the Mediterranean and you're going through the New York Harbor, and yeah, no, that's fearless.
Like 100 people were involved, so yeah. Somebody did it.
Yeah, you survived.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. All right, well, it looks like we're winding down. Is there anyone else? If you want to show your piece, just like hold it up and say a word so that it'll pop up on screen.
Kelly, I actually have a question.
What's the best way to store these?
Well, it's hard, and the best thing I would say is try to store it between sheets of paper.
Right.
And that you might, you know, try to store it flat. You can also roll it, but if you roll it, when you unroll it, it's going to be a curly mess. So if you can, if there's like a book or, you know, somewhere where you can lay down flat, store it in between sheets of paper so they don't get tangled with each other. Ooh, nice masks. Say something so you show up.
Ooh.
Oh,
wow.
Wow.
Thank you.
Beautiful, you guys.
Happy Easter.
A little bit by a little bit.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You guys are gorgeous. Oh, beautiful.
Stay safe and healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and everyone.
Paste it on your neighbor's door.
What is it?
I said you can paste it on your neighbor's door. That's
there you go.
Thank you, Swoon.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
This was amazing.
Bye.
This was awesome.